Drinking life from a fire hose, it seems sometimes. Sound familiar? This is life in the ASAP lane. If you're feeling anxious, stressed, addicted, pressured, you are not alone. In fact, there's a global epidemic of stress and anxiety. Many aren't able to cope without the use of pills, alcohol, food, even retail therapy, shopping. The result is record levels of opioid overdose deaths, obesity levels, and teen suicide attempts. The good news is, there is an exit ramp, and your host, best-selling author, and former U.S. Congressman Alan Steelman will guide you to your very own exit. Alan's mission is to help you learn about and adopt strategies and techniques to restore balance and equilibrium to your life. You'll learn from Alan and his guests simple and practical stress-relieving techniques, and you will be inspired by numerous interviews with other people just like you, who have moved from stressed out to charged up, and from misery to mastery. You are cordially invited to join us and learn to live your life in joy and on purpose. Take a deep breath. Let's begin exiting the ASAP lane with Alan.
Hello everyone, this is Alan Steelman, and we have a very special guest today and a topic very dear to my heart, and I think it will be to yours once you hear this really important message. And the topic is your very own yellow brick road to your very own peace of mind. I'm so happy and excited to have as our guest today Dorsey Standish. And I'm especially excited because I have personally participated in mindfulness classes which Dorsey leads, and she is a true master of her craft. She is the Chief Mindfulness Officer of MasterMind, a gym for the brain, and this will resonate with many of you. She teaches high performers how to achieve greater focus and peace of mind through mindfulness-based brain health. Now, I know some of you may have a resistance to taking up a full practice of both yoga and meditation. And when we use the term mindfulness, that's an umbrella term which refers to both. So we're going to talk today, even though Dorsey is a certified yoga instructor as well as being the Chief Mindfulness Officer at MasterMind, we're going to talk today mostly about the meditation side of the equation. Some of you don't want to jump in the deep water right away. There is a way to stick your toe in the water, as it were, and to find other ways to calm your monkey brain, that brain we're all born with and struggle with our entire life, frankly. So no matter how physically fit one may be, the pace of life today, especially among those who are top performers and who aspire to be, requires not only physical fitness, but mind fitness as well. And you could even argue that mind fitness is the more important of the two, given the global epidemic of stress and anxiety that we're in the midst of and all the damage that's being done to our health, both physical and mental. Please take note of the high performers comment above, because we'll return to that later in the broadcast. So with regard to Dorsey and her very impressive set of credentials and her life story, she has nearly 10 years experience practicing and teaching mindfulness. She has completed the 2-day, 4-day, and 10-day silent retreats and studied the UMass, University of Massachusetts, Medical School's mindfulness-based stress reduction technique. I think that's probably considered the gold standard, isn't it, Dorsey, in this field? Yes. She has a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, and is currently working toward an MS in applied cognition and neuroscience from the University of Texas at Dallas. And Dorsey has told me that she has a type A personality. I tell her I never see that, but I have to confess I didn't meet her during her time as this high-stressed engineer at Texas Instruments, so maybe she exhibited more then than she does today. But anyway, Dorsey, thanks so much and welcome.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'm really happy to be here.
So, talk a bit about mindfulness and tie that to, as you know, in the new book that I've written, I refer to the yellow brick road as our path to a calm mind, the yellow brick road being our breath. So talk a bit about breathing and how you can calm the anxiety and stress in your life.
Yeah, I'd love to tie together mindfulness and the breath. I think it's really important, Alan, you mentioned that I've studied the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, and that's from Jon Kabat-Zinn. And he defines mindfulness as paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. And one of the primary ways that we do that in mindfulness practice is that we pay attention to the breath. So you always refer to the breath as being the yellow brick road. And as we practice mindfulness meditation, a lot of beginner and introductory tracks will have you listen, watch, feel the sensations of your breath as an anchor to keep coming back to the peace that can really only be found in this present moment when you're a witness rather than a doer.
So as opposed to the ruminations of the past and the worries about tomorrow and all the things this monkey's doing, jumping from limb to limb in our mind.
Yeah, Alan, it's a great point. Sometimes when we get still and we kind of watch our minds and try to focus on the breath, we can be overwhelmed by how much our mind really does fluctuate. And there's a saying that I love, which is, an anxious mind lives in the future, a depressed mind lives in the past, and a peaceful mind lives in the present moment. So like you're saying, there's so much peace to be had in the here and now, the now time, but often our mind is either drawn to ruminating about the past or worrying about what's coming in the future. So meditation literally carves new pathways in our brain that help us anchor into the peace that can be found here and now.
Well, that's actually a very good segue to the science behind all this, because there is this stereotype, which all of us who are active in this field run into, that this is weird, and you're too young to remember the Hare Krishna movement from the 60s, but a lot of older Americans still have Hare Krishna, 1960s hippies, and other things that they consider to be weird as being what this is all about.
Yeah, Alan, that's a great point. I think the first exposure that the United States had to meditation was hippies in the 60s and the 70s, like you're saying, bringing these traditions over from Asia, and they were very spiritual and what you're calling weird, you know?
Right.
And what I love about mindfulness meditation, especially given my scientific background, is that it's really anchored in science, and there's a lot of research. Mindfulness was introduced in the 70s, so there's nearly 50 years of research backing up the stress reduction benefits of mindfulness meditation practice. In particular, as we talk about, exiting the ASAP lane in your book, mindfulness has been shown to reduce levels of anxiety and depression, to lower stress, and especially help with chronic stress and chronic illness conditions. It also is a great treatment, especially the combination of yoga and meditation to deal with addiction. And I love helping, we talked about those high performer clients of mine. We can really harness pressure for good rather than evil. A lot of times we turn pressure into stress and we're stuck in that ASAP lane. But there's something called eustress, which is healthy stress, where you use the pressure and the intensity of your job and you harness the full power of your mind using mindfulness meditation, and you're able to use that to your advantage.
Well, that's a very good point, because pressure gets us out of bed in the morning and gets us to go to work.
Yeah.
But when stress and anxiety become chronic and acute, and your vagus nerve starts carpet bombing your full body all the way to your toes with stress and anxiety, over time, premature aging and other illnesses. In fact, I think science and doctors and medicine today say that up to 90% of physical illness and ailments come from undigested stress. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's really important to talk about the science behind all this, because increasingly the scientific community is showing that there are both enormous physical and mental benefits to be gained by calming the mind and starting to engage in a practice of mindfulness.
Yeah, and are you familiar with the story of the Aetna CEO, Mark Bertolini?
Yes, I am, in fact, yes, but please elaborate.
Yeah, I love this story. When we go into corporate clients, we always speak to this. The CEO, Mark Bertolini, had a really bad skiing accident in the early 2000s, and it left him depressed, on a ton of pain medication, and he thought about ending his life. And instead, he finally turned to these alternative medicine practices such as yoga and mindfulness and massage. And when he became CEO in 2011 of Aetna, he made a point to introduce a mindfulness-based wellness practice for all of their employees. And his fellow executives insisted that if he do this, that they had to measure it. So we have this amazing research and data from Aetna employees showing with a 12-week mindfulness and yoga intervention program, almost a 30% reduction in stress levels, an added 62 minutes of productivity per week, which equated to $3,000 per employee per year. And I think the company saved something like $7 or $9 million that first year they introduced the program to the employees. So we can talk about the health and the personal benefits of mindfulness, but it can actually translate to financial benefits and productivity, both for individuals and companies.
Good quantitative results. In fact, I think I remember reading that there are over 13,000 employees that have been at one time and maybe even still active in this company-sponsored initiative.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good jumping off point to the whole top performers issue. Athletes today have a game inside the lines when the game is being played. They've also got an increasingly stressed and anxious game outside the lines. The same analogy applies to all of us who go to work, and we do our best to do our best job between the lines, and we go home at night stressed and anxious and start screaming at our spouse or chugging the vodka bottle or whatever we do to cope. So there's a life inside the lanes, and I think the Bertolone example and what's been done in Aetna is an attempt to help those employees deal more productively at work, but also have a more balanced life at home and not be suffering from some of the stress outside the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think work-life balance is a huge part of it, and a lot of times we have our work world over here and our life world over here, and what mindfulness does is it helps us be fully present for all of it. It almost bridges the gap between work and life so that we can really bring our whole selves and our full presence to all aspects of our life. I want to comment on something else you said, Alan, about athletes realizing that if they harness the power of their minds in addition to their bodies, they can have a lot more success professionally, and your book does a great job of highlighting that. I also love the analogy of, thinking about football players that make millions of dollars a year, and if they weren't training their bodies to do that physical sport, we'd think they were crazy, right? And yet we get paid millions of dollars to be a high performer in whatever industry, but we're not training our minds. We're not staying in shape in any way. And I think that corporations are slowly waking up to the fact that we have to train our brains to be in top shape, not just to avoid these negative coping mechanisms, but also to perform at our best level in the most important areas of our life.
Well, it's a good point, and I heard someone ask within the last few months to a group of executives, will you live to enjoy your success? and it's a good segue to your own personal story, which I find so compelling, of you working at Texas Instruments, a very high profile, very successful, large global company, and you took on increasing levels of responsibility, and being the type A that you describe yourself as, you were willing to do the very best job possible, and you did, but it also had a dark side to it, which has taken you on a whole different path in life. So would you please elaborate a bit on that?
I would love to, Alan. Thank you. Alan mentioned in my bio that I went to the University of Pennsylvania and I studied mechanical engineering. And my plan had always been to get into a large corporation and start climbing the ladder. Take on as much as I could, as fast as I could. And when I got to TI, I was a mechanical design engineer for about a year. But I wanted to keep moving and experiencing new roles, so I became a program manager very quickly. With that job came a lot of international travel. I was going to Taiwan, to China, to India, even domestic travel to some of our design partners there.
How old were you at this point?
I spent my 25th birthday in Taiwan.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, I felt like I was on top of the world. I really thought that I was doing everything that in my power to be happy and successful. But that's actually right before my world changed significantly. Later that month, right after my 25th birthday, I had a true experience of stress-induced burnout. And my doctors told me that I had to take 2 months off of work just to get my physical and mental health back to normal. And the thing was, I was certified as a yoga teacher. I was practicing meditation on and off. I knew what I was supposed to be doing, but I wasn't taking care of myself. And when I had those 2 months off, work had been my whole life. I love traveling. I love working hard. I loved, working at all hours of the day. And when that was taken away, I felt like I had nothing, like it was a vacuum. And so I threw myself into taking care of myself, and committing to a daily meditation practice was the first thing that I did. I read as much as I could. I tried as many different types of meditation as I could. And that really started my journey. When I got back to TI, nothing really felt the same. It was interesting. People there thought that I had been gone for 2 weeks, not 2 months. They had no concept of time. And when I got back, I had such a different perspective on what was important. And I was able to get my work done so much faster. I mean, I think I was working 4-hour days and still completing as much of the work as I had been doing before. Mindfulness meditation had given me this new perspective. And so it wasn't that discovering mindfulness meditation led me to leave the corporate world. It's that it actually helped me be so efficient at the corporate world that I was able to start teaching yoga and mindfulness to other employees at the same time. And that quickly became the favorite part of my week, sharing mindfulness with these really stressed out people. And so I knew a few years ago that it was time for me to leave TI and do this, bringing mindfulness to people who need it full time. And I fully enjoyed my time with Texas Instruments, and they taught me so much of what I use now as a mindfulness teacher in terms of presentation and liaisons with the corporate world. And I'm so grateful for every step of the journey, because it's led me to be able to share the story and have the impact that I do today.
So you were the very definition of the proverbial road warrior.
Yes.
Right? Which many of us have lived through, and I'm using road warrior in a broader sense. So that term normally applies to someone whose job requires them to be on the road and flying on airplanes and so forth. But we're all living in this ASAP lane, which makes us all road warriors, if you will. But the traditional road warrior, this high performer that you've talked about, I know that here at the Brain Institute, they've got an issue, and this is actually an initiative, not an issue. It's going to be the topic of a future podcast, stress-related performance failure. And I think you've been participating in that, as I understand it here. Could you elaborate just a little bit? Obviously, performance failure, cuts across a number of examples. A salesman trying to make a sale and role-playing in front of the mirror before you go in, and then choking when you get in front of the client. Athletes who, quote, choke at the most critical point in a game. CEOs who making a presentation to shareholders and who, again, role play in front of the mirror and then, have a panic attack at the wrong time. So there are all kinds of examples of stress-related performance failures. But could you elaborate just a bit on how mindfulness can be applied to preparing yourself for a high-stakes performance you've got to give? Again, whether it's just a salesman or whether it's a celebrity going into a movie role or an athlete on the field.
Yeah, wow. I love the examples that you've given, Alan, talking about sort of a stress-induced performance failure. And I would almost say that what happened to me at TI, having to get out of the game right before the product launch, was an example, again, of a stress-induced performance failure. I think a lot of times when we experience significant stress or anxiety, it's almost like our brain is hijacked. You talk a lot in your book about the amygdala. It's the center of the fight or flight response that we have when we perceive that we're under attack. And a lot of times, preparing for a big presentation, walking out on stage and seeing all those people, it feels like an attack to your brain. And so the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex, which is normally in charge of the show, the executive control system. And when the amygdala is in charge, you don't have control over your responses, and it can lead to what you're saying, stress-induced performance failure. And what mindfulness meditation does is it trains your brain to come back online faster after it's been the victim of that amygdala hijack. Does it through a number of ways, but mainly this yellow brick road of your breath. Whenever someone says to you when you're upset, just take a deep breath. It can be really frustrating, but that's actually one of the fastest ways we have to get back online. Take a big breath into the belly, stimulate that vagus nerve that you talk so much about, and you're able to bring that prefrontal cortex back online and combat that stress-induced performance failure.
Just back to your own personal story, I was thinking as you were talking, So this comment that I related, will you live to enjoy your success? It sounds like you recognize that if you stayed on the path that you were on, that you might not live to enjoy your success, or at least the success which you had always had in your mind as I'll be happy when I'm a big executive was not meeting all your needs. And so you made a health choice, both physical and mental, as opposed to continuing on a track that leading you down a path you thought would not end well. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, exactly, Alan. And it's kind of like, what does success really mean to you? Is it just about the corporate ladder, or does it mean having a family, having time to work out, having peace of mind? And for me, I work with a lot of high performers who want to continue performing at a high level and succeeding in the corporate world. And we work to use mindfulness and presence of mind to bring them totally into both their work and their home life, and to bridge the gap there, help them be fully present and fully enjoying every moment of their life. So I made a choice with awareness gained through meditation practice of what was important to me. But that doesn't mean that my path, is going to be the same as everyone else's.
Right. Well, you hear coaches of baseball teams and football teams talk about slowing the game down. They don't mean slowing the physical pace of whatever you're performing. They mean slowing your mind down so you can make the right choice at the right time when 100,000 people are screaming your name in a stadium, and another 100 million may be watching, but it's a Super Bowl. Tom Brady, for example, if you start looking at high-performing athletes and start connecting the dots, the Golden State Warriors, NBA champions, the Seattle Seahawks, and the New England Patriots, including Russell Wilson and Tom Brady from those two teams, both Super Bowl winners in recent years, LeBron James, probably the greatest basketball player on the planet, a number of Cy Young Award-winning baseball pitchers, have all bought into the need to slow the mind down and calmly assess situations so their physical assets, being bigger, better, faster, stronger, can carry the day.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and we as Americans have grown up in our individual lives and as a country to be bigger, better, faster, stronger. And we've succeeded in many ways. The dark side is the incredible price we're paying in both mental and physical health, the opioid overdose deaths, the binge eating that's leading. We're second only to Mexico now in obesity rates. Just unbelievable. False wizards, again, ways that we use to cope. So I think and I want to talk about your dad now because
my poor dad.
Right. So men and seniors and kids and teens and college students and African Americans and Hispanics often feel that this weird stuff, yoga meditation, really just for the white female who can afford to pay for instruction. And indeed, Yoga Journal, the best source of information, says that is the profile of the vast majority. That's roughly 40 million out of a country of 320 million. So with men in particular who think, well, I don't have time, or it's not macho enough, or I can't do what the women can do because I'm not as flexible as they are and I'll be embarrassed if I go. And you talk about your dad in an article I read recently, and you hear this superstar in this mindfulness movement trying to persuade a member of your own family. So talk a little bit about your dad and him as a man and the kind of feedback you get when you try to get him to adopt this.
Yeah, Alan, thanks for that. I did mention my dad in an interview I did recently, and I love my dad so much. He's actually a really successful lawyer. He's been named a super lawyer in D.C. for so many years, and he runs an insurance practice at a D.C. law firm. And he is under so much stress. I mean, you talk about these road warriors. He checks his email first thing in the morning and last thing at night. He prides himself on responsiveness. And he is a high performer, but I've seen so many times that he gets hijacked by this stress and this anxiety. And my parents have both seen what a big impact these practices have had on me, and they've kind of opened themselves up to maybe trying a meditation if I do it with them or something like that. But a lot of times my dad's response will be to make fun of, a typical word that might be said at yoga, like namaste, if I try to get him to meditate, or
right.
Om and put his hands at heart center. And he doesn't really get it, no matter how much science and different perspectives I can throw at him, what I've found is the best resource for influencing anyone else in your life to try yoga or meditation is to be the change that you want to see in them. And that is the best way that I have inspired people with my job, with my life, is being how I want to see others be in the world and having them ask, "You're really type A? Are you sure?" Like that's such a great question, Alan.
Right.
And sort of opening their minds to these new perspectives of different types of people doing yoga, different types of people meditating, the different ways you can sit, the different things you can listen to. I mean, there's so many options. It's almost like a buffet, and you need to find one practice of mind-body connection that works for you, whether it's a couple mindful breaths in the morning, laying down and feeling your whole body at night, going to a yoga class. I mean, there's so many options out there.
Yes. Well, to men who may think, I don't have time, because among high performers, that's one of the first things you hear. I read once a long time ago, and it really resonated, that make time for physical and mental health now, or be forced to make time for illness and sickness and maybe something fatal later. And I think particularly as it applies to the top performers who are driven, as you were at one point in your life, to succeed, and as I've been for a long, long time, that is really important. I would say further to the man who think is not macho enough, and I know you've been involved in some of this here at the Brain Center, the four most macho professions on the planet, the Navy SEALs and the Army Rangers, the elite forces of the United States military, who are doing yoga and meditation before going into battle, understanding the need to slow the game down in order to be able to act rationally when blood and noise and bombs and things are going off. First responders, firemen and policemen. There's a very active initiative here, which I think you've been involved in with the Dallas Police Department, coming out of that very tragic event of about a year ago. And then, of course, the professional teams that I mentioned earlier, the football teams that I mentioned. So the competitive edge in many, many high-performing professions is becoming mind fitness. And physical fitness, needless to say, is very important. But being able to act rationally in a calm way in a very fast-moving world is becoming the competitive edge, I think. I think you can argue that with a lot of data to back it up.
Definitely.
So, okay, well, we've got just a few minutes to go, and I would ask you if you'd be willing to give us a few examples of some techniques that we can use, maybe driving to work in traffic. Many people live in places where road rage is becoming an increasing incident to deal with, or the road warrior on an airplane going to a high-stress meeting they're going to, or just someone at home who goes home having been stressed out at work and are now having to deal with life outside the lines. So give us a few examples of how you would counsel someone to deal with those situations, please.
For sure. I'll give you a couple techniques, and then maybe we could demo a short mindfulness practice.
Yes.
Awesome. So Alan mentioned traffic, which I think is a trigger for all of us. And I love this technique. I use it a lot with educators, caregivers, people who easily get worked up at work. It's called the STOP technique. It's really simple. It's an acronym, and it stands for stop what you're doing, take a deep breath. This is even more powerful if it's a belly breath, or 3. And then you can observe any thoughts that are running through your head, any emotions and any sensations in the body. That's O. And then P is proceed in a way that supports you. And so that whole process of stopping, taking a breath, noticing what's going on, and proceeding takes under 30 seconds, but it gives you that little bit of space that we all need when we're triggered by someone who cuts in front of us, by a child asking the same question for the 10th time, a potential fight with a spouse. Just that little gift of space can be so important. So remember that acronym STOP, and I'll give it to Alan to put in the show notes as well.
Okay, so someone in a traffic snarl, for example, so they can employ this style. So as opposed to turning the radio on and listening to a newscast with some stressful event unfolding somewhere in the part of the world, turn the radio off and employ the stop technique. Is that a rough paraphrase of what you're saying?
Yeah, it's for sure.
An off switch. It's an off switch in a high stress situation.
It's an off switch and also an awareness switch. It's like, what's really happening in my body? Can I get curious about how this traffic jam is affecting me? rather than being on that autopilot of amygdala hijack of anger and I got to get there, you know.
Right.
We're going to be stuck there no matter what, so we might as well get curious and mindful and aware about what's happening. And like you said, kind of flip the off switch on the amygdala, pause all the distraction, and just tune into what's happening with you for 30 seconds.
Okay. So I'm going into a meeting with my boss, for example, and it's a performance review, and I'm a little bit worried. So what kind of technique would you advise someone to use in a situation like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alan. I would have this client sit still for about a minute, noticing their breath with their hands on their belly, and relaxing the jaw, relaxing the tension around the eyes, which we'll practice in a moment, and settling on their breath. And then I would have them stand up and take a power pose. Are you familiar with the work of Amy Cuddy out of Harvard?
Right.
Yeah. You know, you talk a lot about yoga, and the mind-body connection is real. We can influence how our mind works by changing the shape of our body. So I would have the client stand up and either put their hands on their hips with their feet wide or have them raise their hands over their head and look up, and practice being broad across the chest and grounded in their feet for about 2 minutes. That will increase levels of testosterone, so increase confidence, and also lower cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Which goes right back to the brain. The magic is in the brain.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Fix your brain, fix your life. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we've got a couple of minutes to go, so you want to do a breathing exercise or two?
That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll do a short mindfulness meditation. Go ahead and find yourself in a comfortable seat. You're welcome to just sit in a chair.
Okay.
Let your feet rest on the floor. Let your hands rest in your lap. And if you're comfortable, you can close down your eyes. Relax the corners of the eyes. Soften the jaw and the muscles of the face, the tongue. Feel the shoulders melt away from the ears, and invite a little bit more space across the collarbones, across the chest, just like those power poses. Feel your tailbone firmly rooted in your seat, and let your spine rise up tall. With this awareness of a strong, grounded body, invite your attention to your breath. Take a few deeper breaths, seeing if you can hear the sounds of the breath as it moves. Nothing to do, nowhere to be. We're just watching our breath. Let's go ahead and bring a hand or two to the belly area and direct our inhales into the abdomen. Feeling the belly expand on the in-breath and letting that expansion go on the out-breath. If the mind wanders away from the breath, it's almost like you're training a puppy. Be patient and compassionate as you bring your mind back to the feeling of the breath in the belly. Each time you come back to the present moment, bring yourself back to the breath. It's like doing a bicep curl for the mind, strength training for the brain. And for these last few breaths here, I want you to even out the length of the inhales and exhales, silently counting to 4 on the in-breath and 4 on the out-breath. Take 3 more deep breaths in this way. After your third breath, let your hands rest back in your lap. Take a moment to appreciate the strong body, really embodying presence with your body at this moment. And also find gratitude for your healthy mind, your steady breath. And finally, thanking yourself for taking a few minutes out of your busy day to reset your mind, calm the body, and increase your presence and focus. Bring your lips into a small smile as you wiggle the fingers and the toes, and blink the eyes back open, slowly coming back into the space around you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Dorsey. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Yellow Brick Road. You just took a journey on it. And I hope that even though it may have been your introduction, that you did get a glimpse at least of that Emerald City where troubles drop like lemon drops and the sky's always blue. The ones where the wizard lived, but as you know how he turned out. So this is your path, the Yellow Brick Road. Dorsey, as we close out now, we were seated. So for all of those who may be listening and think you've got to get into the lotus position or take some other weird stance that they're not used to taking, talk just briefly on you can meditate in virtually any body position, correct?
That's definitely true, Alan. The points that we walked through, relaxing the eyes and the jaw and the shoulders and feeling rooted in your seat, whether you're lying down or seated, those are the important points to look for when you choose a posture. You're welcome to meditate in an office chair. In fact, most of my clients choose that option, just a normal chair. You can also sit cross-legged and use a cushion or a pillow beneath you to elevate your hips. And a lot of people enjoy lying down to do a body scan meditation practice, which is also a great way to wind down before bed. So there's no wrong way to do it. If you're breathing, you can meditate. It's really just about bringing awareness to how you are in the moment.
Very good. Dorsey, thank you so much. This was an incredible session, and I hope all of you who are listening benefited by it. And we will see you next week again on the Yellow Brick Road. Thanks for listening.